Up next, I have a special treat for you. A few days ago, I had Sharon Jogerst and Tina Collen in the studio, and we did an interview. Tina is a local artist here in Colorado, very interesting person, and she just released a very cool book. Just won an award, and she's in New York City right now accepting it. But here, check this out.
Tina Collen is an artist and writer living here in Boulder. She has been an artist all her life, and her work has been exhibited in Paris, Barcelona, Frankfurt, and on a year-long tour of museums throughout Germany. Tina has recently published her memoir, Storm of the Eye, an autobiography. The I in the title is lowercase, and on the cover there is an eye, a die cut of Tina's eye looking out. It is an autobiography, not an autobiography. Storm of the Eye is a story of empowerment and healing, an unusual hybrid interwoven with memorabilia, fold-out paintings and photographs, die cuts, pop-ups, and other interactive features that have become a part of Tina Collen's life's tapestry. Beneath all the lightheartedness, however, lies a heart-rending memoir. Next week, it will be announced that Storm of the Eye, an autobiography, is a Nautilus Book Award Gold Medal winner for 2011. Nautilus Book Awards recognize the leading edge of books about where the culture is headed by the people who are taking it there. They acknowledge books that promote spiritual growth, conscious living, and positive social change, works that stimulate the imagination and offer new possibilities for a better life by changing the world one book at a time. Previous winners include the Dalai Lama, Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, Andrew Weil, Marianne Williamson, among others. The essential box set of landmark speeches and sermons of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. won this award in 2010. Storm of the Eye, an autobiography, is also a finalist for Book of the Year from Forward Magazine, and those winners will be announced next month. We are so honored to have Tina Collen in the studio to talk with us about her book, Storm of the Eye, an autobiography. Welcome, Tina.
Hi.
It's so nice to have you here.
Oh, I'm excited to be here.
So can you tell me what started you writing this book? It's such an unusual mix of emotional narrative and graphic images.
Well, as an artist, my house is filled with the lifetime of my work. And one day, suddenly, like a Zeus lightning bolt, I realized that that this work that I'd surrounded myself with was actually telling me the real story of my life. And I started writing, and I could not stop. I was compelled to write this memoir. Actually, when I finished writing this book, my father hadn't spoken to me for 15 years, and I never knew why until I wrote this book. That's actually how I found out. And this whole experience has, in fact, changed my life and changed my relationship with my father, even though he does not know about the existence of this book. And I actually speak more about that at my presentations. And I have one coming up at the JCC, the Jewish Community Center, June 2nd. And I actually talk about that subject. But the trigger for writing this book, actually, of all places, was a comedy festival in Aspen on Valentine's Day. It was an evening that took a turn I didn't expect and really did change my life. There were 3 performers that came on stage and just talked about their life, unscripted. That's actually what this particular show was. And the first one was Michael Patrick King, who was the producer and director of Sex and the City. And he spoke about his life and how it intersected with his creative work. And he stood center stage alone, unscripted, and revealed his dreams and his fears and his regrets, all disarmingly sprinkled with embarrassing anecdotes. He recounted his conversation with the show star Sarah Jessica Parker, concerning their urgency to find a new love interest. Once her current beau, Mr. Big, was written out of the script. Probably you remember these characters.
Right.
And with great humor, King described how the two of them plotted to ensnare the famously dramatic Mikhail Baryshnikov for the role. And the backstory details culminated in a colorful description of King's own torrid affair with Baryshnikov. Shocking news.
Interesting.
And I admired his high-octane wit and his personal charm, but I was mostly impressed by the rawness of his candor. So during this performance, there were a couple of other people that came up. Terry Garr came on stage, and she was very awkward on stage and revealed that she was suffering from multiple sclerosis, and that since she was unable to appear in films anymore, this was her debut as a stand-up comic.
I see.
You could just imagine a hush filled the audience, but she was just so charming and warm. The audience was soon laughing with her about her stories about being in Hollywood as a young, adventurous sexpot in the 70s. And the last person that came was Richard Pryor's daughter, Rain, who spoke unflinchingly about growing up in the shadow of her celebrated father. And, it felt like she was a young girl in the midst of drugs, abuse, craziness. And she talked earnestly about her relationship and the connection between pain and humor and how she finally found her way to the stage. By the time she was finished, my eyes were rimmed with tears. Everyone in the audience was so moved. And I left the tent spellbound and drained. I was just so touched by these performers' courage and humanity. And the impact of seeing them confront their issues stayed with me for such a long time. And I thought about my own art and how it intersected with the events and challenges in my life, and whether I would have the courage to expose these vulnerable parts on stage.
Oh, wow.
And that really was the beginning of the, I've always faced emotional issues by either writing or making some kind of art. And this book is a combination of both of those things.
It's such a brave and beautiful book.
Well, thank you.
Could you read us an excerpt from the book?
Sure, I would love to do that. Let's see. Here's what I think I will read this. It's from the prologue. At first, it was exciting trying to resurrect my high school French. But after 2 hours of going from store to store in sweatpants and sneakers, pantomiming foam board and rubber cement, I started to wonder if the evening was going to come together in time. By 7:30 p.m., though everything was perfect, the room was filled with interesting people. There were delicious hors d'oeuvres, gorgeous flowers, and I was wearing a deep blue chiffon caftan and long silver earrings. I couldn't understand half of what people were saying about me, but it sounded like it was good. I was in Paris, the city of light, at an exhibition of my work, and it turned out to be the most glittering night of my life. 8 hours later, I found myself weeping in front of Oscar Wilde's gravestone in the legendary Père Lachaise cemetery. I didn't know exactly why I was crying then, but I know now. I wandered aimlessly along the narrow cobblestone passages, taken by the disparity between the elaborate mausoleums and the simple tombstones right beside them. Stopping to read the inscriptions, I could hear the voices of generations of people speaking to their loved ones, both famous and unknown. There on the headstones of saints and sinners alike was carved, "We love you, we miss you, we honor you." I was filled with sadness. In the midst of all the caring chiseled there in stone was the shadow of my father and the lifetime I'd spent trying to understand his anger towards me. His anger has shaped my life in ways I am only now beginning to fathom. 15 years after that day in the cemetery, while living in Boulder, Colorado, I was on my way up the stairs one evening, and I happened to look over at a ceramic figure I'd made in my early 20s. It was displayed on my staircase bookshelf under a spotlight. I'd always felt a strong affinity for it, though I never knew exactly why. I'd seen the dank, mysterious shape so many times that I hardly noticed it anymore. This time it stopped me in my tracks. It looked like something disemboweled. The figure was exuding an eerie emptiness, an incarnation of longing. Someplace inside of me a painful void was still hiding, and there it was, exposed. The piece, I realized for the first time, was about me. I went slowly up the stairs looking at other things I'd made. Moving from room to room, I surveyed the paintings, drawings, and etchings that were hanging on my walls. My childhood was seeping out everywhere. I began unearthing art and relics from my past. From shoeboxes and closets, I pulled out photographs, letters, newspaper clippings, journal entries, and poems. In a frenzy of activity, my work table filled with objects as the landscape of my life was laid out in front of me. Some of the things, placed haphazardly beside each other, seemed to exhibit a magnetic attraction, and once locked together, they moved as a pair. A faded quotation, clipped from the pages of my later life, fell arbitrarily next to a series of small paintings. I'd created the colorful images right before I was married, and they depicted the developmental stages of an embryo. The quotation that had fallen next to them read, "It's never too late to be what you might have been." Suddenly, the paintings were no longer simply about birth. They were also about the forgotten seedling of myself. Hours morphed into days as I scanned the bits and pieces into my computer and tried to find the words to connect them. The things I surround myself with, I was discovering, were revealing an untold story. No one was paying me to do it, but it felt so much more urgent than the design jobs I was working on. I became consumed. I would wake up before dawn, and on my way to the bathroom, I'd step into my studio, turn on my computer, and heat up some water for tea. On the way back, I'd stop for a second to look at my monitor. The next thing I'd know, it would be 4 p.m. I'd be sitting at my computer, still in the silk long johns I wear to bed, having not yet brushed my teeth, and the UPS guy would be knocking at the door. I don't know if it was divine intervention or demonic possession. I'm an artist, a graphic designer, not a writer. Yet there I was, words and phrases pouring out of me faster than I could process. Or I should say, pouring into me, and from there emptying onto the pages. A book began to materialize. A book telling the story of my father and me. I've always had a tough time with the subject, but once it took the form of a compelling project, I embraced it with the same openness I approach all creative challenges, and in the process, somehow, it managed to untangle itself. For as I found order for the objects and pieces of paper in my hands, I discovered that I myself was being reassembled. I never intended to do a full-fledged life review, but I couldn't stop thinking about some of the unanswered questions. Why was my father so angry at me? Why did he try to alienate me from the rest of the family? Searching for answers, I uncovered a bombshell that shattered a core belief I'd held all my life.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I know I read that book from cover to cover, and for me, it was like a suspense novel.
Oh,
it was so beautiful and so fun, and I just enjoyed it thoroughly.
In a way, it was a suspense novel for me also, because although I was writing my story, there were many things, many parts of this that I came away with a changed life as a result.
That's really something. Who would have known, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Do you have any upcoming events?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, since I won the award, I am going to New York to the Book Expo America, and I'm going to do a book signing there.
Oh, wow.
They're showcasing the gold medal winners. So I'm off to do that. And then when I come back, I'm going to do my multimedia presentation, which is actually where I talk more about what happened after the book, which is has been extraordinary experience for me. I talk something about that because in the book I don't use the word spiritual one time, but it has in fact been a spiritual journey. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to do my multimedia presentation at the Jewish Community Center in Boulder on June 2nd at 7 o'clock.
Great. That sounds fun. If people were interested, where can they purchase your book?
Well, the book is on the shelf at the Boulder Bookstore and Barnes & Noble in Boulder and Explore Booksellers in Aspen. And from my website, which is www.tinacollen.com. And on my website also are excerpts of the book and reviews and a lot of other entertaining stuff.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming in to talk to us. I would like to close with a quote from the last page of the book where there's a very funny photo of your son and your college roommate. And underneath that...
A funny combination of people to begin with.
Right. That sounds like it.
How did they get together?
And underneath it, you wrote, "We know we're finished grieving when we've bored ourselves and all our friends with our story."
and I'm done.
Thank you, Tina. We wish you all the success in the world.
Oh, thank you so much.
And Tina's book, Storm of the Eye, an autobiography, also has national distribution and can be ordered by any bookstore in the country through Baker and Taylor.